Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Always Be Testing podcast. I'm your host, Ty DeGrange, and I'm really excited to talk to David Rodnitzky today. What's up, David? How are you?
Hey, Ty. Always good to talk to you. I think we've probably known each other for about 15 years at this point.
It's been, yeah, it sounds about right. It's been kind of awesome to continue to stay in touch, and we got a chance to collaborate, years ago. And you've obviously done some awesome things. I think our audience will be really excited to talk about some of the learnings that you can share in your evolution in performance marketing. Heck yeah, heck yeah. Um, yeah, what's the latest? What's been new? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I guess, gainfully retired from running an agency, and I'm now sort of going back to my early consulting days and trying to find a way to be a one-man show. So
I
a little
love it.
little different. I mean, I don't have an EA anymore, and I got to schedule my own meetings, but there's a lot of freedom too. I get to do yoga every day and spend time with my family, so I can't really complain.
I love that. I love that. It's so cool. I'm excited to dive into all of it. And props on the yoga. I think it's one of the best things you can do. I don't do enough of it. So for folks out there that don't know, maybe would love to dive into how did you get into maybe just give us your background because you have a really interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to even the 1990s. That's how old I am. Um, I graduated from law school in 1999 from the University of Iowa, and I came out to the Bay Area basically because my best friend was living here, and because there were mountains, and I had no other plan other than just hang out with my best friend near mountains. And I got lucky in 2000, and this was the first .com boom, and there were companies that were just hiring warm bodies essentially. And there was a .com called rentals.com, which was doing property management stuff, and they hired me to be manager of strategy, which meant pretty much absolutely nothing. It just meant like do research papers and you know do do analysis of the market, competitive research and stuff. And so I was doing all that, and their director of marketing resigned, and there was no one to do marketing. And these guys were paying $25,000 a month to a brand agency and $25,000 a month to a PR agency, and they hadn't even launched a product yet. And so I kind of sat down and I looked at this and I was like, this can't be right. There's got to be something better than $50,000 a month to these two agencies. And so I discovered a little company in Pasadena, California called GoTo.net, I believe is what it was called. And the concept that they were bringing to the market was rather than pay for an impression or pay for a sponsorship, you pay per click. And so they had this search engine where you could go in and you could type in any word, and you could say, I want to buy the word house for rent or apartment for rent. And it might be 3 or 4 cents a click. And so I took this $50,000 budget and I just threw it all into the GoTo basically. And again, this was the very early days of pay-per-click advertising. And, literally we were paying for the most expensive terms out there were maybe 30 or 40 cents, like for the word like personal injury lawyer or something like that. Um, that company went belly up when the .com boom became a bust. And I was lucky enough to,
Shocker.
what's that? Yeah, shocker. I know. I mean, they raised $28 million from Sequoia and SoftBank, which, is a big deal. And they weren't able to
Hmm.
ever sort of really release a product or do much of anything, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
So I ended up sort of having my exposure to what was later to become search engine marketing at that company. And over the next um, 8 years, I worked at a variety of startups in Silicon Valley. I worked at a company called FindLaw, which is a legal website. Worked at a company called Adteractive, which did lead generation. And then I worked at a company called Mercantilla, which did dropship e-commerce similar to Wayfair. And when I was at Mercantilla, this was 2007. I'd now been working at companies for 7 years, progressively getting more experience in online marketing generally and search engine marketing particularly. And at Mercantilla, when we were just talking offline about kids, my wife was pregnant with our first son. I was traveling to India once a quarter to manage a team, and I just wasn't happy at the company for a variety of reasons. So in January of 2008, I quit um, and just said I'm going to do something else. And my son was born in February of 2008, so I quit a month before my son was born. I went down to a coffee shop in Pacifica, California, where I was living, and I just kind of just let people know I'm not working for other people anymore. I'm just trying to figure out what's next. And I had a bunch of different ideas for what I was going to build. I launched like a site about wrinkle cream that was a basically affiliate lead gen site, and I had an idea around a food website, a bunch of ideas. But then people kept calling me and saying, "Can you help with search engine marketing at my company?" And I kind of followed the advice of a friend of mine, which was, if people are knocking down your door saying they want to give you money for something, that maybe you should at least look into it. And so I did, and I started offering SEM consulting. And it was kind of bad timing in the sense that it was the Great Recession. It was that moment in 2008 where the mortgage industry collapsed, and there were a lot of unemployed people, and companies weren't spending money. But I found that I was charging such a little amount of money that a lot of these companies were like, I'd rather just hire David for $2,000 a month than have to pay for a full-time employee. Awesome. And I started doing that initially as an individual consultant, and then I realized that I had too much work to just do myself, and I brought in a partner. And then, we were able to hire a couple people. We got a small office. We went from a coffee shop to a Regis temporary office to a 600 square foot office, and then 1,000 square foot office. And then along the way, we realized that to win bigger clients, we needed to offer more than just search engine marketing. So we hired experts in search engine optimization and in social media, paid social media, video advertising, mobile advertising, display advertising, analytics, conversion rate optimization, marketing strategy. We even did some affiliate, believe it or not, Ty. I know that's one of your areas of expertise.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
I know.
I can't believe it.
I mean, interlopers coming into the field with,
You didn't ask
knowledge.
Me?
Yeah. We're jack of all trades. All right. Sometimes they say a jack of all trades is a master of none, but we tried to hire experts in each of these areas. And, we grew the business. And so, we can talk separately about how we ended up selling the business and exiting. Yeah. But before we got up to at our height, we were at about 500 people managing about I think close to $3 billion of media spend for clients. So
it's amazing.
That's the yada 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 story at the end of the growth story.
It's amazing. I mean, how many people can say that? It's truly awesome, and obviously been able to work with you.
Thank you.
As a client, see your business grow. It's just been fantastic. David, it's awesome to hear your progress. It was awesome to witness your growth. How coffee shop and a one-man show to 500 employees and billions managed is just unbelievable. What were some of the aha moments you had along that way? We've kind of talked about it, and you've written some really interesting things about your journey with that. Like, what were some of the ahas that you like to kind of instill on folks and leaders and practitioners?
A bunch of things. I think number one is, the importance of culture, and not just saying that you care about culture, but really living a culture. So one of the things that we did was we really were trying to be really deliberate about what we defined as our core values, and also what we defined as our core promises to the team. So to give you a couple examples, one was we really instilled in the team, what are the core values? We asked people to sort of memorize them and to think about everything they did at the company from the lens of core values. So we let people know that you were going to be promoted, hired, and fired based on whether you live those core values. We also had this concept of core promises to the team. So it's not just about the values that we care about, but what can you expect as a team member? And so we tried to live those core promises very clearly as well. So as an example, one of our core promises was we don't work with jerks, also known as the no asshole rule. And we had a couple instances where we had, in particular with clients, and if you work in a service business, you're inevitably going to work with people who are not respectful of the team, who treat you as a servant instead of a partner. And we had some situations with some really big clients who were treating our team like they were servants. And we, talked to the client, gave them a chance to improve, and they didn't improve, and we fired them. And I think that as a general lesson around growing the business, I mean, we were always trying to think about outcomes measured in years and not quarters. And inevitably, when you fire one of your biggest clients, you're going to have a bad quarter. You're going to see a reduction in your growth, and you may have a hard time hitting your target goal margin goals. But in the long term, you keep your people happy. So that's something that was pretty important to us. I think another thing, and I've been sort of going through and I've been writing all this down in my own newsletter, just trying to remember the things that I think were important to us. But there's a book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Branding. And I literally can only remember one of the 22 laws. The other ones are very good as well. I just don't remember them. But the law that I remember is, if you can't be number one in a category, create a category you can be number one in. And so when I started 3Q, I looked around and I said, like, where is it possible for me to be a leader, for me to be number one? And I was like, well, I'm not going to be the number one agency. I'm not going to be the number one agency in North America. I won't be the number one digital agency. Probably won't be the number one SCM agency. I think we actually probably did get to that point at some point. But then I said, what I have experience in is Silicon Valley startups. And I could probably say that I'm the number one agency helping Silicon Valley startups. And so I sort of set that as my goal. And then I went about creating a marketing strategy to achieve that goal. So I did some of the things that you would sort of, every agency does, just network a lot, go to networking events, get connected through friends, have lunch with marketers. In Silicon Valley, I had lunch with a lot of investors, venture capitalists. We hosted local events. We had a client summit where we invited prospects as well. We did it at the Giants ballpark a couple times. We did the 49ers ballpark. We brought in people like Barry Bonds and Jerry Rice to shake hands and have that local flavor. And then we even did some things that were kind of crazy. We did a billboard campaign on Highway 101 in Silicon Valley, which, mostly you see billboards for Apple and Google and, Snowflake, and there's little 3Q Digital on the billboard. We did a campaign on NPR Marketplace locally. So we just kind of tried to triangulate around, like, my goal was that some startup marketing director would go and talk to their friends, say, who should I hire for online marketing? And they should say 3Q Digital. And then she'd go to some message board and she'd see 3Q Digital. And then she'd ask her investor and they'd say 3Q Digital. And then she'd drive down 101 and see 3Q Digital. And it was and that was at the point where I was like, well, if that's happened, then, we did have these situations where a potential client would call us up and basically say, I don't need the sales pitch. I've been told you guys are the guys. Just tell me how much it's going to cost and let's get started. And we would sign a contract within a day. So I've got millions of other tips, but those are two that kind of come to mind as like sort of things that I think were pretty helpful in sort of helping us scale.
That's awesome. I love that. How did you kind of stay on top of the ever-changing game while managing people, tech, clients? As you kind of referenced earlier, you and I know, like, channels rise and fall, and there's a constant, like, race to address new tactics and strategies. Like, how did you manage that in your growth at 3Q?
Yeah, I mean, on one level, I think I was just a voracious learner. So I was just constantly reading everything I could. I mean, I used to, back when, like, your My Yahoo page was like the place that you went to get all your news feeds or RSS feeds. I had 30 marketing news feeds, and every morning I was reading every single one. Search engine land, search engine journal, you name it. I had Brad Geddes. I mean, all these guys who are like providing great information about the space. I was reading everything I could. But I think the other thing that I did was I kind of had an adage in my head, which was, when I heard something from a client, two or three different clients telling me the same thing, that was probably a sign that it's something we should invest in. And so, case in point, I mean, like, in around 2011 or 12, I had started having more and more clients say, "Hey, you guys offer Google SEM, that's great, but what about Facebook?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's not my wheelhouse, but I should look into it." And so, I realized that, and in researching it, that this was going to be a major opportunity. And so we went out and we found the best expert we could externally who had already been doing it, and we created a practice.
It's awesome.
So that's, I mean, I think the number one way that we sort of identified where to grow. I would also say that, I mean, the flip side of that, I guess the negative side, if you will, is as we scale the business, and this is common for almost every agency, as you scale, you start to take on bigger clients, and bigger clients typically want one throat to choke, and so and it's some of it's like, you could say it's like big company laziness or whatever, but some of it's just practicality. Like if you're managing a $500 million budget, and you've got 20 different channels and 10 different softwares, you don't have time to have 30 meetings a week with your vendors. So you naturally just move towards as few as you can. And so we lost a couple of deals where we were doing incredible work on let's say the SEM stuff for a client. But some big agency came in, and the client would even say to us, like, "Look, we know they're not going to be as good as you are at SEM, but I just can't have all these meetings. I can't manage all these people. So we're going with the big client, big agency." So
Yeah.
that was also a forcing function for us as well, sort of realizing that, like, I don't ever want to be in a situation where I provide superior results and I lose because of a reason outside of those results. And so that made us change some things and go after some of these additional channels.
How did you continue to maintain the quality of that expertise? It seems like um, there was something that was definitely part of it. The results were there. Um, what was the kind of somewhat of the how behind that in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I've always admired the Netflix culture, deck, the original one. One of the things they say in that deck is, above average performers deserve above average compensation. Adequate performers deserve a generous severance package. And it feels kind of cruel, but it really is, I think, crucial, because I think the lesson that I've taken away from managing people is that A players want to work with A players, number one, and that B players, not only do the A players leave, but they oftentimes the A players who stay around have to do the work of the B players. We had a guy on our team who was one of our senior leaders who was a former semi-professional soccer player, and we were having a debate one day about A versus B players, and he said to me, he said, "You know what? I think it's okay to have some B players because maybe they're just nice people, and they get along well with clients, and I think it's good." And I said, "You're a former soccer player. Let me just ask you from a soccer perspective: if there's 11 people on the field and 9 of them are A players and 2 of them are B players, what happens?" He goes, "Oh, well, the A players have to cover for the B players, and they can't play their positions they're intended to play." And I said, "That's exactly the problem." So we were pretty, I guess, pretty relentless about, first of all, promoting great people and really just trying to be proactive about giving them raises and giving them responsibility, not waiting until they sort of their annual review necessarily, just saying, "Look, you're a superstar. We're going to keep pushing you." And then also for people who weren't, for whatever reason, working out, helping them find an opportunity somewhere else. I would also say, related to that I really believe in the notion of trying to hire people smarter than you. I try not to have any ego, and I loved it when, after a couple years in the business, there were numerous people on the team who knew way more about online marketing than I did. And I think at our height, as we scaled, I mean, I remember we had like 20 or 30 people on the team who had been with us for at least 7 or 8 years. We may still, I don't know.
It's awesome.
And you only keep those people by, again, giving them lots of opportunity, surrounding them with A players, and creating a great culture that they are going to want to show up to work for.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. How did some of the maybe transitioning a little bit? Obviously, there's so many learnings, in building up something so large. How did kind of your new opportunity come about? Maybe you can help fill in that transition and kind of what you're working on now, because it sounds obviously fascinating, and you've written a book. A lot of things have happened and you've achieved, but maybe share a little bit about that, some of those ahas that led to the transition into what you're working on now.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started the business, I really mainly just didn't want to work for someone else because I had found that I kind of lose the political battles when I'm an employee, and I hate the politics and I lose. That's a bad combination. So I really just started, just because I was like, if I'm the boss, at least I can control the politics, and at least I can sort of, in the case of a tie, I win. But as
Yep.
we scaled, by 2014, we were up to about 150 employees, and we started getting inquiries from third parties who wanted to buy us. And for me, I never thought I'd be in this situation, but suddenly I had this question, which is, do I just keep growing this thing and sort of doubling down and betting it all on red and see if I can turn this into a $1 billion company, or do I take some risk off the table, de-risk myself, and find a partner to sell the business to? And I felt like I'm sort of a conservative guy. I guess I was sort of raised in middle class Midwestern roots, and I was like, if I can find a partner that does three things, does what's best for employees, does what's best for clients, and does what's best for shareholders, I think that it's a good time for me to make a move. So I ended up in 2015 selling the company. I did not know when I sold the company that about two and a half years after we sold it, the company that bought us decided, for a variety of reasons, that they needed to sell us, and they were not able to find a really good offer. And so we ended up coming in as a management team and buying the company back from the company that sold us. And then a year after that, we got even more interest from acquirers, and we did another transaction where we sold to a couple of private equity firms. And then a year after that, or actually, I guess it was 3 years after that, we ended up selling to a large Dutch agency called Dept. So from about 2014 to 2022, I was involved in the purchase of one agency and the sale of my own agency 3 times, and learned a ton along the way. I mean, mergers and acquisitions is its own language, its own rule set. It's like nothing that you've ever experienced as a founder. And so when I finally sort of left 3Q and I looked back and I said, obviously I think I can provide guidance to agency founders and founders in general about how to scale a business. But the area that I thought was most interesting and that is maybe lacking the most is providing guidance around this mergers and acquisition process. And what I find so interesting is that for an agency founder, a sale of their business is the biggest financial transaction of their life. And it's also a very emotional transaction. I mean, it's one way to think about selling your business is you're selling your purpose and your identity for cash. And I think a lot of people don't really think about that. So it can be a big windfall financially, but it can also be emotionally very challenging. And for most founders, it's the only time in their life they'll do that. And they're on the other side of the transaction are people who have done this, in some cases, dozens of times. And so you're at a disadvantage, both in terms of a lack of knowledge and a lack of experience. And so I'm trying to start a consulting firm that really stands with the founder, puts myself in their shoes, and as they go through this process, helps them sort of decide on these really important questions. Do I even want to sell? How much do I need to be happy? Does this buyer represent my core values, and will it be a successful transaction? Do I want to stay with the company after it sells? If I don't want to stay, what do I want to do next? How do I transition out of the business? I think I actually created a list, and I think I came up with like 112 questions that you really need to answer while you're going through the M&A process. Someday I'll publish that in a blog post or something. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I think it's a role that doesn't currently exist. There are people who are investment bankers whose job is to sell your business. There's mergers and acquisition attorneys whose job is to make sure that you're protected when you sign a contract. But there's not really that founder whisperer role. And so creating something new. We'll see over the next couple of months whether I'm onto something or I'm just crazy and people don't need it.
I love it. I think there's definitely a great need and opportunity. And like you said, you've been there, you've been through it so many times, and there's all these other parties that have either done it a ton on the other side or kind of looking at it from more of a legal or contractual view. And so to think about it holistically and take into consideration the core values and financials and um, what's best for the founder is really, I think, compelling. What's the biggest mistake you see? Sorry, I interrupted you. What's the biggest mistake you see in founders thinking through this or navigating this situation? And maybe what's the biggest trap or thing that you think you might want to caution folks to avoid?
I think that probably it probably all comes down to money and in different ways. Number one is I think that um, founders don't really think about what do like, as I said before, do I want to trade identity and purpose for money? And then how much money is that trade worth? And so they sort of go into the M&A process maybe with sort of a half baked perspective of, well, I'll just go through this process. I'll just see how much money people are offering me, and maybe it'll work for me, maybe it won't. And it's a ton of time and it's a ton of commitment, and it's a huge emotional decision. And so I think that there are, for a lot of founders, the answer is that you shouldn't sell now, and for some founders, that you should never sell. That your life will be negatively affected even if you have all this money in the bank. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is when people are choosing the partner that they're going to sell to, there also is the money factor can become very overwhelming. I mean, you might have one company offering you $10 million, one company offering you $8 million, and one company offering you $6 million. And the obvious, knee-jerk reaction is, well, let's go for the most expensive seller. But this isn't like selling a used, iPhone on eBay. I mean, there's so much more that goes into it, because you're going to, in most cases, when you sell, you're usually, the buyer wants you to stay around for anywhere from 2 to 4 years afterwards. So if you sell to someone who turns out to be a complete jerk, you've got 4 years of your life that you're going to spend, in misery. And there's also the chance that you sell to a jerk that they do everything they can to prevent you from getting your full payment. So it's a lot of that sort of just really trying to step back and look at the 30,000 foot perspective on what you want in life and what you want to do in the short term and the long term, that I think people don't really pay attention to. Obviously, on the legal side, there's all sorts of very important clauses that you have to be careful about. I mean, if you've seen the movie The Social Network, there's that scene where
Oh yeah.
Eduardo Severin gets told by the lawyers that I don't remember the exact number. It was like his 30% stake has been reduced to 0.3% or something. It's like they reduced his valuation about 1,000 times. And at the end of the day, I tell people, all you can do is do a deal with people you trust and work with great lawyers. But you never know when you can do a deal with someone that you really love, and then that person gets fired 3 months later, and a new person comes in and says, "Oh, I'm not honoring this commitment." So having a legal document that really buttons up every scenario. I like the phrase "trust in Allah, but watch your camels." That's really crucial, and can really trip people up.
It's a great phrase. It's a great phrase.
Yeah.
Are there things that you've seen that have worked well in the diligence process for founders where there's a little bit of that validation or getting to know period? Not to get too in the weeds, but it sounds like that a cultural fit and that alignment and that trust is pretty paramount in the process to determine if this makes sense for a team to sell or founder to sell. What's the um, anything you found that can work there to get to that answer as opposed to rolling the dice and just judging off of a couple of chats?
Yeah. A couple of things I would say is, first of all, I think due diligence on the potential buyer is really important. And I would say, in particular, trying to do your own due diligence and not just looking at whatever the buyer has given you. So to give you an example, one of our sales, we were on the 1 yard line to sell to a buyer, and I was pretty happy about everything I'd heard from the buyer, and felt like it was a good fit for the business. But I decided to call a friend of mine who had sold his agency to the same buyer previously. And I said, what was it like? He said, well, the buyer really cares about profit maximization. And so they told us that we couldn't do any training of our team because it wasn't a profit-driven activity. I was like, wow, that is not a good sign. I mean, for many reasons, you'll do a bad job with your clients, you'll lose team members. It's not part of my ethos as a founder. So because of that due diligence call, which obviously wasn't someone that the buyer had given to me, it's someone that I had done my own third-party digging and connecting the dots, we ended up saying no to that buyer and choosing a different path. So that's one thing that I think is really important. The other thing I'll say, it's kind of a legal issue, but when you're signing a contract, the first stage really to formalizing a relationship with the buyer is to sign a letter of intent or an LOI. And the letter of intent is always non-binding. It's not something that you can point to in court as evidence that, they promised me this or that. But it's a really good indication of how the buyer is going to treat you. So if there's something I really recommend to people to write very extensive letters of intent and really ask the tough questions at that point and not during the negotiation period when you're actually signing the contract. So you could say like, hey, I'm going to be a minority owner of this company. Are you going to sign up to have a fiduciary duty to protect my interests? Fiduciary means that you act as if someone else's money is your money. And if the buyer says, no way in heck, I'm in it. You write a good contract and that's all that matters. I'm not putting that in the LOI or the contract. That's kind of a warning sign. Just seeing that the buyer is willing to sort of address your needs in that early stage in the LOI, even if it's not binding, I think it can be a really good indicator of whether this is going to be someone who's going to truly partner with you or who somewhere down the road is going to do a little bit of a left turn that you didn't expect, where it could be advantageous to them and not to you.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. This is, yeah, I can see so much value that you have to share, and it's pretty impressive. Similarly, you even wrote a book, and that's kind of amazing. How did that kind of come to be, and is that kind of part of the new venture, or how do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, I was in I had a group of agency founders who had all of us had sold our agencies. So we were like the ex-founders, what's the term? Club, or meeting for Founders Anonymous or something like that.
Yeah,
and
I love it.
And we were all talking. We were all sharing these stories on the phone about what had worked for our deals, what hadn't worked. And at one point, I said, guys, no one's written a book on this. Don't you think would it have been valuable when we were selling our agency if we had had a book that gave us the step-by-step, here's what to expect next, here's the pitfalls? And they all kind of shook their head in agreement. And one of the guys from the affiliate world, Bob Glazer, I said, Bob, would you like to go in on this with me? And he said, well, I can't really write the book, but I'll be your executive editor, and I'll put in, a lot of effort on the editing side. I said, great. So I went about writing it, and then, Bob helped me edit it, and we published it. And yeah, it's connected to the consulting idea, because at the end of the day, I'm charging $50 for the book. If you're serious about selling your agency or even your service business, $50 seems like a no-brainer. It's a lot cheaper than hiring me. So it may be the case that, in 9 out of 10 cases, people don't even need to hire me. They just read the book, and that will get you enough of the way down the field that you'll be smart enough to make good decisions. But at the same time, I also know, as you do as well, that there's a difference between reading something and doing something. I could give you a manual on how to fly a 747. You can study it for a month, but you're probably not going to then a month later go and try to fly it. So I
Yep.
think it's, at the end of the day, I think it's a calling card for me. That's kind of the point of the book. I mean, I think people will read it and hopefully they'll say, this guy knows a lot about the agency world. And if I'm going to, the
100%.
M&A world, if I'm going to sell my business, I better talk to him.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like you've had some awesome, learnings and, um, epiphanies through this journey. And yeah, I love the reference you made previously. It sounds like some pretty cool world travel and adventures with you and your family. You share kind of what's been some of the best memories or trips or adventures that you guys have had?
Yeah, I'd say two examples. One was when COVID happened. We were all locked inside for a while, and I had really sort of stepped down as being the CEO. At that point, I was just kind of an advisor, so I had a lot of free time. So my younger son and I, in the course of about 4 months, once they opened up, let you leave your house, we did, I think, 38 parks, hiking parks in the Bay Area. Um, so we literally sort of almost any park on the map we did. We went to these like places where you can jump off limestone cliffs into fresh water, and we my son's really into snakes, so we did a lot of hikes where we found snakes. And then earlier this year, actually, when I was for my younger son again, I've done stuff with my older son as well, but my younger son's really an adventurer. We did a 3-week trip to Africa, and
That's
again, his
awesome.
his interest is snakes, so we were able to go to the Kalahari Desert, and on our third day there, we they let us get out of the car and we walked up to a puff adder, which is the deadliest snake in Africa, and then we found out that behind it was a Mozambique spitting cobra, which can blind you from 27 feet away with its venom. So my son was on cloud nine that we were able to be within 5 feet of these two of the 10 deadliest snakes in Africa. So I don't know, for many people that probably
Wow.
isn't an upside to having more free time, but it is for my family.
It's not going to make everyone's bucket list, but for your son, he was like,
No,
I'm good.
some
That
people might kick the bucket after seeing the puff adder if they don't get out of the way
literally,
fast enough.
yeah, the things we do for our children.
Yes. So hopefully you'll get this opportunity too, Ty. As your child gets older, he'll
I can't
have
wait.
specific interests.
He's just now crawling, so we're enjoying this period
Yeah,
while we
keep
can.
him away from the snakes if that's the case.
Yeah, we've kept our head on a swivel a few times in Texas, and I've had
I
to
bet.
kill one already to avoid it from hanging out with my daughter. But we've been lucky so far.
Yeah. Well, I will say that in the last couple of years I've learned a tremendous amount about snakes just from walking around with my son, and they're actually they really want to get out of your way. I mean, the rattlesnakes
Yeah,
especially.
yeah,
Um, we
for
see
sure.
this summer we've probably seen 50 rattlesnakes because we go on a trail where we always see them. And they
Yeah,
always act the same. I mean, they have no interest in being anywhere near humans. The only reason that they attack is if you mistakenly step on
you're
them or you're
cornered, or
cornered.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we have a
No,
separate
it's
podcast about snakes. They've got a lot of knowledge.
part two will be all about snakes. I mean, when I was a kid, I feel like I was obsessed with reptiles as well. I don't know. I didn't like, it wasn't a phase that lasted forever, but I had a lizard and was all about reading about different salamanders and snakes and all of that. So
They're pretty
it's
cool, I
fun
have to
for,
say.
yeah, for sure,
They're all
for
cool.
sure. That's awesome. You kind of lived and breathed the agency story, just something back to that. What are some things that you think agencies are faced with now that maybe is different from a few 5, 10 years ago? Um, there certainly seems to be more players in the space, and it's gotten more sophistication. I'm curious to get your perspective on like what trends agencies need to be kind of pretty mindful of.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote a blog post like 8 years ago now called "The Search Engine Marketing Agency is Dying and What to Do About It." And I just sort of tried to point to some trends that I thought were worrying to agencies. And you just mentioned some of them. I mean, number one is the number of competitors out there, the number of people who are trained as experts in online marketing. I mean, there was a point, again, when you and I started, we're old hands.
Hmm.
You would go to a conference, there'd be 200 people at the conference, and that was the entirety of people who had expertise on a subject, right? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you went to Affiliate Summit in 2000 there were probably 200 people there, and now there's 20,000 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's just more competition. That's number one. I think
Mm-hmm.
the second thing is that prices continue to go up for buying media, or for really, if it's not prices, it's competition. I mean, getting ranked in search engine optimization is harder. So the sort of the arbitrage opportunity is gone to some degree, and that just makes it harder to sort of justify your profit. Um, I would say the third thing that is a trend is that all the platforms are increasingly using algorithms, AI, automation to, on the one hand, make things easier, but on the other hand, displace experts or to level the playing field. So I think that, my expertise is in SEM. I mean, there was a time in 2007 or 6 when I created methods to upload, thousands of keywords a day, very granular keywords with very precise landing pages and an ad text and bids. And Google has simultaneously taken away a lot of that granularity, and also so that gives the disadvantage for experts, and also just created automation so that average advertisers can do about as well as experts. So one of the ways that I describe it when I think about paid media is, when I started in the business in the early 2000s, success was probably 80% human and 20% technology. Today, it's probably 80% technology and 20% human. And so I still think that means that there's a need for the humans, because at the end of the day, if you can have a 20% improvement in your performance, that's still valuable. But it's not what it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago, where it was 80% humans and there were less humans doing it. So, I mean, I guess if there's good news, I mean, I don't want to be a complete Debbie Downer here. The good news is that like digital marketing was under indexed from 2000 to 2015, call it. A lot of advertisers were still stuck in some cases, literally yellow pages and newspapers and magazines. I got my mother-in-law gave me a subscription to a photography magazine, a print subscription. And the thing is like 15 pages long now, because there's no advertisements anymore. It's like no one buys print. So the good news is that everyone's woken up to the fact that digital marketing should be way more than 50% of your budget. So that means that agencies should continue to get pretty big budgets to spend. And I think we still have a ways to go before we've fully
Yeah.
seen, how much spend should be on digital marketing. It's going to keep growing. So that's an upside.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the rising tide lifts all boats, and the industry getting better is certainly been something we've observed generally. So it's like, while there is some of that challenging, headwind conversation, which is real to address and prepare for, I think there's absolutely still a lot of opportunity in this space in terms of how many good practitioners there are, how many trusted practitioners there are, versus how many new businesses are coming online, how many businesses are modernizing, how many businesses are expanding their digital marketing efforts daily. So totally hear you there. Um, that's awesome. What are you seeing anything interesting in terms of? I think we talked about this a little bit, like folks that are building out in-house teams, folks that are looking to external, source. I feel like that trend kind of continues to ebb and flow, and depends who you talk to in the situation. What are your observations there?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a debate, and I think that there are advantages to both in-house and to agencies. I think the advantage to an in-house team is always that team is going to know your business so much better than an agency. And so that means, if you're if you're an online university, it means knowing that in January, people have New Year's resolutions that they want to go back to school, and you better have your budget ready, and you better have that sort of messaging in place. I mean, you just know that intuitively if you're working in-house at a company, and your agency may or may not know that. So I think it's important to leverage the strategic knowledge of in-house teams. by the same token, agencies typically have much more knowledge of channels. So an agency that's a search engine marketing agency is living and breathing Google advertising all day long. And they're usually doing it. Every person in the agency is working with between, let's say, 4 and 6 clients. So they're learning faster, not only because they're spending more time in the system, but because they're getting inputs from multiple clients, what's working, what's not working. So to me, the answer is really always a hybrid approach. You need some in-house people to keep the strategy lamp burning bright, and you also need some agency people to constantly be cutting edge on the channels. I do think it's a little risky to sort of to do one or the other for that reason.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. Seeing that work firsthand on so many ways in house and as an agency. So I love that. You've dropped some good book recommendations here. You've got your own book, but what's another maybe 1 or 2 book suggestions for the audience? You've got some good ones.
Yeah, I would say my standby is probably Influence by Robert Cialdini. Influence: The Power of Persuasion. That book just really sort of blew my mind when I first read it, about the little things you can do to influence behavior. And then I would say a Seth Godin book I like a lot is Purple Cow, which kind of goes back to my notion of, if you can't be number one in a category, create a category you can be number one in. And he just talks about how at some point, whatever, in a crowded market, people can't differentiate. I mean, you've seen one cow, you've seen them all.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you become a purple cow so that people really sort of, you stand out?
Love it.
That's a good one.
I think there was a recent brand that I think went all in on that. And I think they had, I want to say it was one of the credit monitoring. Was it John Cena and an actual purple cow in the ad? I've heard of this book, so I'll have to finish it.
And he did a great, when he first released it, he sent it in a milk carton, a purple milk carton, which again
amazing.
is just like living the brand. It's like, how many times if you receive a milk carton in the mail, you're going to open it,
Just a marketing whiz. That's such a smart move.
He totally
Love
is.
It. Yeah. David, I feel like we could talk on this stuff for hours. You've dropped so much great advice and information. For folks that are interested to learn more about you and some of the stuff that you're working on, where can people find you?
Yeah, my website is Agentic Shift, AGENTIC shift.com. And you can reach me at David@AgenticShift. And then I'm not really into X or Instagram or anything like that, but I am on LinkedIn, and I have a newsletter that I publish on LinkedIn and another one that I'm publishing through the Agentic Shift website. So love to connect with any of your listeners.
Love it. Really appreciate you. Always a pleasure. It was an awesome conversation and look forward to more.
Thank you, Ty. Always great to catch up with you.
You too. Thanks, David.